Dziękuję. Pragnę bardzo podziękować za zaproszenie mnie, żeby właśnie jako dziecko trzeciego pokolenia właśnie miała prelekcję tutaj w ambasadzie dr Bożena oraz panu ambasadorowi. Ja będę mówiła właśnie o frailty, ale przepraszam, także po angielsku będę mówiła. We know that our NHS has changed over the last 70-odd years, or 71 years, and that has led to various changes, including the delivering of the future hospital. And we know that hospital medicine is increasingly revolutionising, with elderly care becoming at the forefront because we have got an ageing population, a population which is steadily getting older, where we have a number of inpatients who are much older than we were used to, and we're seeing an increasing number of people in care homes, but also with frailty in the community. So what is frailty? Well, frailty is an inherent inability to cope with even the smallest of problems, such as a UTI can really turn an older, frailer person into a very ill person. It isn't necessarily linked with ageing, but it is something we see with increasing age. And if we look here, these are the eldest people alive in the UK. A tutaj to jest pani Tekla, która ma 113 lat, a tu pan ma 111 i to jest zdjęcie, jaką po maratonie w wieku 110 dał radę jeszcze pobiegnąć. Ale dla nas to wiadomo, że właśnie kruchość czy słabość jest niestety chyba część naszego życia. I w Polsce teraz właśnie mówią o zespołu kruchości, raczej geriatrycy, a chirurdzy raczej o słabości. A najlepiej było, jak byłam na konferencji w Krakowie, w miejscu urodzenia moich dziadków, że właśnie pytałam się dokładnie, no to który wyraz używacie? I mówią do mnie, my po prostu używamy frailty. Chciałam przedstawić moją właśnie rodzinę. To są moje dziadkowie, tutaj dziadkowie Sawiccy, tutaj z domu moja mama jest Dochan. I ja zawsze myślę o tym frailty, jak nasze osoby w naszych rodzinach właśnie są i jaki poziom one mają. Moja babcia ze Skresów pochodzi i niestety podczas wojny jej gęś ugryzł, jak Rosjanie przyjechali i właśnie kulała przez całe życie. A więc można powiedzieć, że ona zawsze miała jakąś słabość. Ale to dla niej nie było ważne. Ważne było, żebyśmy właśnie mówili po polsku, byliśmy tymi Polakami. Ale jak ona właśnie spadła, to już bardzo szybko przeszła przez lekką słabość aż do tej agresywnej. Mój dziadek tutaj był w dobrym stanie zdrowia i nawet opiekował się babcią Sawicką przez dłuższe lata, która była schorowana. Ja pamiętam, jak zmarła, jak miałam 6 lat, że właśnie ciągle była w szpitalu. I właśnie pamiętam nawet tę noc, jak mama wróciła i powiedziała, że dziadzio jest smutny, ale dopiero rano nam powiedziała, że babcia zmarła. A ten mój dziadek kończył swoje lata w Laxton Hall, jeden z naszych polskich domów starców. I właśnie w tych domu starców właśnie często osoby mają albo tą średnią frailty, albo tą właśnie najgorszą. A tutaj dziadek tak samo jeszcze w ogrodzie robił, bo musiał ogórki zrywać w ogrodzie i posadzić, żebyśmy mieli kiszone ogórki właśnie tuż przed śmiercią. Ale także był schorowany, bo miał COPD. Jak z dr Bożeną wczoraj wieczorem rozmawialiśmy, pamięta, jak właśnie wózek pędził babci do góry w Lourdes i nie dawał sobie rady, bo już właśnie miał ten mild frailty. And that's why, as soon as you get another illness, it becomes a big stressor. And it becomes worse the bigger you get. So so that actually it can mean a difference between being independent and being dependent. And that's why it's so important, because it's not just about the physical signs, it's also about the psychosocial and actually even the social dimensions. So living alone, living with less people around. And there's an awful perception, no older person wants to be called frail. It's the phrase that people almost hide from, but actually explains a lot. And it's led to the fact that actually some hospitals call their older services frailty units. Others, like ours, call it a care of the elderly unit. But it's what suits the individual. But there's lots of various negative words associated and also positive. I zawsze śmieję się, bo tu właśnie rodzina jest. So it is something seen in older people, it's also seen more commonly in women, it's more seen in the less educated, those that are socially isolated, and that is a huge problem, to the point where we have campaigns particularly looking at loneliness now. And as you can see, there's a huge diversity in Britain. So where I live, up in Yorkshire, we have one of the highest areas of significant frailty when you look at GP services. And again, this is West Yorkshire, so I'm not going to be out of a job. But it's something that the NHS has increasingly recognised, and they've put together now a 10-year programme of how we improve our services, how we make a difference, whether it be by enhanced care home work, whether it be by further community services, but there is even now an incentive for GPs to screen for frailty and actually act to prevent frailty occurring, because if we can reduce the risk of people becoming frail, they are more likely to be more robust and manage with those minor problems. And the King's Fund is just down the road, which published this. This is all around coordinated care, and there's been a real shift since I became a consultant 5 years ago to being very much around the patient. And that's why there's various guidance out there. The British Geriatric Society, of which I'm a member, has been fit for frailty. They've put out documentation now for GPs. There's now a frailty toolkit. And what's hot off the press is ambulatory care units, but actually same-day emergency care, particularly for frail individuals. To the point where there have been discussions at the Royal College just up the road exactly on that topic. So, with the changing systems, the college produced the Future Hospitals document, and I was really honoured, because I'd only just become a consultant, to be part of the Future Hospitals programme. And we were lucky enough to be one of the development sites. So we were right at the forefront of changing the way that our older systems services work, and actually developing future leaders to the point where I'm now head of service. So what was it like? Well, when I started as a consultant, it was a bit of a lottery. We had an AAU, an acute admissions unit, but you weren't guaranteed a serial geriatrician. My appointment meant that actually we were able to provide a service Monday to Friday. And that led to actually the evolution of our frailty team, which we call REACT, Rapid Elderly Assessment Care Team. These are physios, medics, third sector, social services. We also work with various people within the departments. And the aim was to ensure that if we could get people out, we would get them out sooner rather than later, but also that they underwent what's called a comprehensive geriatric assessment, that it wasn't just focused on that one problem that they'd initially been presented with. We were looking at all the frailty markers. So a case example is somebody I saw this week, where he'd actually come in with some chest pain, which turned out to be nothing. But in the midst of conversations, it was revealed that he'd fallen 3 times this week. And actually, we could then put together a plan. We found a postural drop, we were able to change his medications, and he went home happy, with his family happy as well, because we'd also given them some details about how they could get a care link for him. But there's even a bigger shift. There's a shift that actually, in Ipswich, for example, there is an emergency department dedicated to frail older people. So they, instead of seeing ED consultants, are straight away seen by elderly physicians. Where we work, we've actually produced an acute care of the elderly unit, which we call our frailty unit. It is one of the biggest units in the country, and some people have criticised us for that. Some frailty units are only small. But actually, I always think the most important person is the individual that's poorly. But there's an increased waiting time in EDs, and we know that's associated with a significant increased mortality. And none of us want to see these sort of scenes. This is the scene we want to see. And that requires an integrated approach. And that's why it was very clear when we set up the acute frailty units, of which ours was just one of them, that they're specially designed environments suitable for older people, light, they offer patient-centred care, they plan for discharge, and they link in with community. So we link in with our care home work, we link in with our intermediate care work, we link into primary care. And it's always about holistic approach. Now, many of you will recognise this young lady. Her name was Kate Ranger. She was one of my dear friends. We were registrars together, and she was a consultant actually about the same time as I became consultant at Mid Yorks. She led the Hello My Name campaign. And she always taught me that care and compassion was really important in elderly medicine, because the little things really matter. And that's why all the care we provide is always provided in a holistic approach, ensuring comprehensive geriatric assessment is at the heart of what we do. We also co-produce. Now, co-production in medicine is still quite a new thing. What do we mean? Well, it's encouraging patients to be part of forming the service. So they've designed our leaflets. And this wonderful lady, who's now a very dear friend of mine, actually ensured we were saved because they wanted to move us down to the dark, dingy acute medical unit, which was the wrong environment. It was dark, it was disorganised, it had loads of side rooms, because unfortunately we've got a privately funded building, so we've got more side rooms than you can swing a hat at. And it was the wrong environment. And actually, through her and her volunteers, a letter to the chief exec made a real difference. But we've also reduced inequality. So I actually head the services now for 3 hospitals for elderly care, and we've reduced length of stay across both. But there's also a continual encouragement. Everybody has probably heard about the getting it right first time, and increasingly every specialty is coming under scrutiny. So there's a constant evolution. So we already at Dewsbury, which is our smaller unit of 20 beds, have direct ambulance transfers. And on Monday, we go live with our big site, our hot site, Pinderfields. It'll be an interesting few days. And this is just one of our pathways. So it's got to be clear. It's got to be clear that if people are deteriorating, they go to ED, that actually for that frail individual, particularly if they have significant cognitive impairment, getting to a direct med makes a huge difference. And it's been a success, not just for staff, but for patients. It's reduced length of stay. And actually, it keeps us on our toes. And on top of that, we're driving forward. So we've actually developed our same-day emergency care. It was set up 4 weeks ago, the week I went to Polska. But it allows people to be turned around. It allows people to be in hospital less than 24 hours. If they need to be there, they get admitted. But quite often, particularly from 24-hour care, they significantly deteriorate if they come in and are in for any length of time. And what we don't want is that we need to then rehabilitate them. Most of us have heard of PJ paralysis. It really does exist. A week in bed results in 10% of muscle loss. It's a huge problem. So where else do we spread our wings? Well, we already in frailty look at fractured neck of femurs. We're now going to be looking at laparotomy patients, and actually we're increasingly getting involved in silver trauma. And frailty services are constantly evolving, and it means that actually external type things also occur. So this is actually Thursday, when we won Team of the Week for our endeavours with our same-day emergency care. And this patient actually came out of the side room there, which is one of our family support rooms. There's something called the Johns campaign, which allows carers of individuals to stay with their loved ones, and we have on every care of the elderly unit at Pinderfields we have 2 designed rooms, which actually the wardrobe there has a pull-down bed, so that carer can stay. And actually it was a really sweet thing he did. And he had the decency to come and say thank you. But we also look at dignity. So I hate the fact that older people sometimes are in flashy gowns where and it really helps for patient experience. But these are just a few of the ways that frailty services are changing, and the fact that the way that we manage older people. But there's also an integrated approach. So there's various points on the system of frailty where we can intervene, and actually it's all about partnership. We work across 2 clinical commissioning groups, and each has its own frailty agenda, but essentially it all does the same: integrated, seamless care that is high quality, patient-centred, with supportive networks, with a healthy and safe environment. But this has led to lots of work also in the community. So some of the initiatives that have occurred have been talks at fire stations. Yes, I've spoken at a fire station. We've done Sloppy Slippers campaign where people have changed their slippers. We've also been really lucky because we've had such engagement with our third sector, who actually led on the frailty agenda across the district, that they now provide a service and they take people home. So instead of the ambulance dropping you off at your front door, and when you can't walk and you're on a Zimmer frame, getting through the door can be quite challenging, they will actually settle a person home. They will ensure they have milk, they will ensure they've got bread, and it just makes for a different service. They also offer an anxiety type service because, believe it or not, many older people live on their own and they get extremely anxious when they're finally home, particularly after a long length of stay. But there's also been a lot of work in the care homes, and across the country we're now seeing what's called the red bags. They were initially developed down in Sussex, but it's a bag where you have your 90, you have your hearing aid, you have your DNR, you have your papers from the care home, and it all is very clearly visible, and that is your passport around the hospital with your belongings. So there's no more excuses for care homes sending people in with nothing, because believe you me, the amount of times we've seen that, it's a lot. We've also done some education. This is one of the podcasts from the Vanguard work we did about 3 years ago, and also talks. But a lot of the work is now about advanced care planning, because actually for the severely and moderately frail, it's not always appropriate for them to be admitted. And actually when you start talking to people, they don't want to be admitted. They want to be in their own home because they know they're probably going to die, and they know that they actually would prefer to be at home. That doesn't mean to say they can't get oral antibiotics. So in some places we can do subcutaneous fluids, but actually for some people that can make a huge difference, just that relief. And especially I do a lot of advanced care planning around those that really get very agitated, so you're not going to go anywhere near them with a Venflon, because actually they're going to hit you, scratch you, bite you. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to adapt the way you practice medicine. And this is one of the slides that made me really think when I was putting this presentation together about actually the fact that many people will be in their last 1,000, 100 or 10 years, days of life. And if anyone hasn't seen the NHS England video on the last 1,000 days, it is a really powerful thing. And increasingly, it becomes common practice to talk about resuscitation. Unfortunately, Caritas and the assisted dying bill is also becoming highly topical. And that's why getting it right for older people is really, really important. And it will be an interesting time to see what develops. But some of the technology, or some of the future, I think, of my speciality is probably already occurring. So we already have started using telemedicine. One of our partners in Wales in the Future Hospitals programme use that to run their clinics, so that people across North Wales were able to access services. But actually, is there a room for now throat thrombolysis services of being able to almost phone directly into somebody's house to try and avoid their admission. And this is some of the data from Airedale, which shows there are a huge number of reasons that telemedicine can actually intervene and be helpful. That doesn't mean to say people won't commit, but it's a different way that we practice medicine now. And it does make a distance, because increasingly we are moving into the community, and we have a rise of the silver surfers, the older population that use computers, use technology. So no more do you need to break the bad news, and actually the daughter in Australia, in China, can't be part of that conversation. And I've done that. It was difficult. It was one of our deputy chief nurses' fathers, and she wanted her brother involved because she didn't want the burden of all the information. And it was different, but it's achievable. And actually, we have increasing technology. We have a huge workforce crisis in the care homes, even getting carers. There's not enough out there. And increasingly, there's still a lot of people that are providing care from families or friends. But there's also new technologies. So this is a cat dog that actually records how a person is today. It records their temperature. It tells us what their pulse is. It can tell us various bits and pieces. And actually it's quite soothing. One of my inpatients had one recently, and it was adorable. But there's an increased rise of various care facilities. It really is Big Brother watching you. But the other workforce problems is that now in Japan, particularly for the care of any patient, but particularly older, they're using robots. And actually, technology will move forward. We're already looking at IT systems which we're able to access, and I pray for the day where we have an integrated record that if I'm here and my patient suddenly moves down and is in a GP surgery down south, they can access those records and know exactly what's gone on and doesn't have to ask the same questions again and again. It would be wonderful, and it will come, I have no doubt. But I do wonder whether actually we'll lose that personal touch, that touch of a hand, that reassuring smile, those little things that really matter. And there are more innovations on the way. We've already seen on the BBC the use of children going into care homes to improve loneliness, and it really does make a positive impact on people's health. We've already seen the studies about dementia and music, and I'm sure that those will increase. And as I say, there's continual work around loneliness to try and prevent frailty. What was really interesting when I went to Krakow to the European Geriatric Society meeting, literally 4 weeks ago, was they were talking about vaccination, about the studies that actually have shown that if you are admitted and you have COPD and you've had your vaccine, you are far more likely to continue to survive, you're far more likely to have improvements. That's not rocket science. But what was rocket science was it actually prevents your admissions for other things. It prevents your admissions for acute coronary syndrome. It reduces your risk, believe it or not, of falls because you don't become frail. And we're doing more and more work about frailty prevention. This is guidance that is due to come out from NHS England again about the building of strength, the improvement of balance, the reduction of sedentary time, because actually increasing physical activity is really important in that prevention. And prevention surely has to be better than cure. Thank you for listening.